Welcome to the Karen Kenney Show.
Hey, welcome to the Karen Kenney Show. I am so happy that you are here. Thank you for volunteering to spend a little time with me, showing up and, just being here, wanting to spend a little time together. I really super duper appreciate it. I know how busy life can be and how we often all feel like we have 1,000 things to do. So the fact that you're electing to spend a little time with me in your ears, right? I really do appreciate that. So thank you for your support. Excuse me. So you might have already seen from the title, first go in and then go out. I'm going to come at this from a couple of different ways. And you might hear that, my voice is a little more somber or a little more dialed back than I normally am, right? I'm normally like, cracking myself up and whatever. But I got to tell you guys, the world right now is just, it just feels like it's all on fucking fire, doesn't it? There is so much suffering that is happening in the world right now. And it's really normal. It's really normal. I just have to say this, for people to feel a wicked lot of fear, maybe overwhelm, exhaustion, rage, despair, hopelessness, like all the feelings that are coming up through our human experience. And I know that a lot of people are struggling about the amount of suffering that you may not be personally experiencing, but we are certainly witnessing. And I know that some people like to just kind of turn away and they say, I can't watch this. I don't want to know. Right. And everybody's got their right to do whatever they want to do. I've been a person who, especially after what happened to my mom, in the way that she was killed, is that I try not to turn away from hard things, hard feelings, hard emotions, hard situations. I try to do my best to plant my feet and call upon a strength greater than my own, and also find some internal strength and to not turn away. I think that we have to bear witness. Bearing witness is one of the ways that we maintain our humanity, keep our humanity intact. It's how we also don't lose sight of our compassion and our empathy, and how we don't pretend like we're disconnected or we're cut off from things or we're safe from things and it's just happening out there to other people, right? Now, I understand sometimes we do have to take breaks. Our nervous systems have to take breaks from the atrocities and the killing and the war and the murder and the innocent children and babies and old people being killed and slaughtered, and just all the hatred and the racism and the division. Like, there's just so much. I know this, and it's important. I think it's important that we kind of talk about it, because if we don't witness it, because this is what happens, right? In part of my work, one of the things that I discover is that if we don't witness our own suffering, then we are also more likely to not want to witness other people's suffering. And we get little blind spots to our own suffering, to other people's suffering, and sometimes the suffering that we ourselves might be causing. But also, if we don't have compassionate witnesses in our life, this is how we develop shame. Not telling our own stories, not being bearing witness to other people's stories, making them like unmentionable. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Mr. Rogers too, but something that Mr. Rogers said, and I might do a whole podcast on this. This is something that came from his mentor, is that he said, whatever is mentionable becomes manageable. And I think it's really important that we don't turn away from not only the things that are happening in the world, but how those things are showing up in our own bodies, in our own, our minds, our bodies, our lives. Because if all minds are joined, as we say in spiritual, kind of spiritual traditions, right? We are all, like we talk about unity and oneness, and we're all one. Well, if there's one collective consciousness, we are all feeling that ripple effect. Even if a war is happening, a gazillion miles away, it feels like, we are all still, because we are all connected. I really do believe that. So as people have, I've been talking with my friends, and I've been, of course, reading some things, trying to educate myself more, because there's so many things that often happens in other places, in other countries, where there's so much history, and there's just so much heaviness, and there's so much that you might not understand being an American citizen, right? But the one thing I'm like, I don't always understand the intricacies that are happening maybe in other countries. I don't always understand the generational traumas, the generational beliefs, the generational maybe hatred and separations and things like that. One thing we all understand is human suffering. The one thing we all know is that innocent children and babies should not be getting blown up and killed and murdered and screaming for their parents. And, it's just... I don't, whatever quote unquote, if you're on a particular side, right? Whatever your beliefs are, whatever. I think the one thing we can all agree on is that innocent people being killed and murdered, losing their homes and being raped, and all that stuff is just, it's not okay. And it's brutal and it's tough. And that's what I want to kind of talk about today. Like, when these kinds of things are happening in the world, when tragedies, sometimes it's right, like it's like wildfires, or it's like acts of nature or whatever. And sometimes it's humans who are hell-bent on killing one another. When these things happen, we can sometimes have that moment that often happens when, if you've ever lived in a place where there's not a lot of light pollution, and you stand outside in a pitch black night, and you look up and you can see the vastness of the stars above you. And you realize sometimes in those moments just how fucking tiny and small you are, like how sometimes insignificant you feel, right? And there's something very humbling about that. But I don't want us to forget, in this concept of our smallness, or I'm so far away, or whatever, that we don't have power, and we don't have agency and autonomy and authority of what we can do. So I told you I was going to mention Mr. Rogers. So I think it's a fairly well-known quote at this point. But, Mr. Rogers once said in an interview that when he was a little kid and scary things were happening in the world, he would see things maybe on TV, or, he was, just aware that things were happening, and he would get scared. And his mom would always tell him, look for the helpers, look for the people who are doing something about it, basically, right? Like, look for the helpers. And so that's going to be part of our theme today, is about helping. Like, what can I do, right? I have so many people right now who are just like completely just like almost frozen in, like, it just all feels too big, too overwhelming, right? I live in New Hampshire, I live in California. Like, what can I do about the Ukraine or the Middle East or Palestine or Israel or all these things, right, that are happening all the time? I mean, all the time. I mean, if we were able to really access all of the, like, between earthquakes and, fires and, again, wars and destruction and all of it, we would just be completely, I mean, it would just be completely overwhelming. So we know how it goes when there's a news cycle, right? Whatever's probably going to get the most eyeballs, the most views, the most whatever. But like it's like we focus on something for a little while, and then we go to the next trauma, we go to the next tragedy, we go to the next thing. And it can be like really, really intense. And so people are like, what do I do? Because I think most people do feel some sort of intrinsic desire to be helpful. They want to know what can they do. They just don't know where to start. They don't know what to do. They don't know how they can help. And so their lack of knowing makes them almost paralyzed, where they do nothing, or they tune out, or they numb out, and they don't bear witness. They just kind of turn away, or they turn their back, and they think like not my problem, not my thing. So I just wanted to talk about this today. And I know that this episode might jump around a little bit because I'm just coming from my heart and thinking about just coming from what's coming up as I'm talking about this. So the number one thing, right? So let's start with the title of this. First go in and then go out. So here's what I always tell people. If we're seeing things in the world that we don't like, first thing you got to do is like feel your feelings. We're not here to suck it up and stuff it down anymore. Those days are over, right? We're too emotionally intelligent to believe that shit still works, right? So first we actually have to learn how to be with our feelings, to actually feel our feelings, hopefully have a safe place with a trusted friend or a sweetie or a sibling or a family member or a support group or a therapist or a coach or a mentor, or whatever it is, where you can express how you are feeling. A place where you can cry, a place where somebody maybe can just sit and listen or hold your hand, where they're not trying to fix you, change you, blame you. They just are allowing a space for you to have your feelings, to move that energy like through you and out of you in a non-harming way, right? We don't want you screaming at other people, hurting animals, hurting yourself, hurting anybody else, right? But a safe place where you can feel your feelings, where you can talk about the things, right, that are happening and how, like, yesterday I saw a video of a tiny little boy, a little Palestinian boy. I don't know, what was he, like 3 years old? And he was still like covered in dust. And he was at the hospital and he was by himself. His home had been bombed. And you could tell from his big, beautiful eyes that he was in shock. And I couldn't turn away. And I watched as a doctor with blue rubber gloves on his hand hugged the little boy close to him, and he was talking to him, and I could see the closed captioning, like what the translation was. And he was asking the little boy, "Are you afraid? You afraid of the bombs?" And the little boy, all he could do was shake his head. And then the guy from the hospital, like hugged him and pulled him close. And the little boy just burst into tears. And I thought, oh my God, like I just wanted to jump through the screen and hold that little boy so close to my heart. And I went downstairs, and my sweetie was like sitting at the table having some food. And I just literally sat on the floor by his feet. And I just wept. And I was also playing with Bunchy, that's why I got down on the floor. So I'm not trying to make it sound all this dramatic, but I was on the floor and just crying, because I know that I can't, for my own well-being. What will make me not be able to be a helpful person is if I just try to stuff it all down and put on some tough act and just act like it's not happening. Right? Just like trudging forward, like fucking blue collar, like, mass hold kid. Like, I'm just like, whatever. Yeah. You know what? I am strong. I am tough. But one of my greatest strengths is my vulnerability. And I believe that's what everybody's greatest strength is to not walk around with shields up and your dukes up and pretending like these things aren't devastating and awful, because they are. I never want to lose my humanity. I never want to lose my sensitivity. I was a highly sensitive kid, and I'm still a highly sensitive adult. But here's my point. First we go in We notice how we're feeling. We maybe we journal, maybe we speak it out loud, maybe we do a podcast, however it is, we go to therapy, whatever it is, we express it, we feel it, we're with it, we go inside. You know, so many people these days, it's so fascinating. We're so concerned with, oh, I got to get my message out there, right? Like, oh, I learned this thing, or I am this thing, or whatever. Now I got to get my message out there. Everybody's so concerned about like getting the stuff out there. And I'm like, first, we got to get the message in. First, we got to get those tools that you just learned in. First, we go in. And as I'm looking around the world and I'm seeing all of these things, and it's like, what do we want, right? We want more inclusivity, right? We want less violence. We want, it would be nice. Wouldn't it be nice to live in a nonviolent world? I'm going to do a whole episode about that, right? Wouldn't it be nice to live in a world where there was less violence, where there was less racism, where there was less bigotry, where there was less homophobia, where there was less, or just none at all, right? But I understand we're dealing with humans, and humans be humaning and people be peopling, right? But wouldn't it be nice to live in a world where we just fucking loved each other and accepted each other for who we are? So here's my point. We want to live in a less violent world. If we want people to stop bombing each other and hating each other and attacking each other and bullying each other, trying to wipe each other off the planet, then we have to first go inside. We have to go in, and we have to be honest about the violence that lives within ourselves. We start with us. We become aware of our own propensity for violence, the violent way that we think, the violent way that we speak, the violent way that we talk to ourselves, the violent words that we use, the violent way that maybe we move through the world in our bodies, the violent thoughts that we have. So we have to start by paying attention inwardly. Now, this isn't about navel gazing. This isn't about, well, I'm going to pretend nothing's happening over here because I need 6 months to feel my feelings and go. KK said, go in. No, I mean, yes, we go in, but it's about doing like an inventory of ourselves, because that's how shit changes. Is each person starts to take their own moral inventory. Each person is fearless and bearing witness to their own bullshit, to their own separation, to their own specialness, to all the ways that they other, to all the ways that they have dropped their own kind of quote unquote, I don't mean physical, right? Bombs. We have to go inside of ourselves and recognize the places where we have been violent and we are continuing to be violent towards ourselves, animals, the planet, each other, etc. We start by cleaning up our own backyard. So first we go in, because it's in that where we can start to take maybe some tools that we've learned. And if you haven't learned tools on how to regulate your own nervous system, if you haven't learned ways to help yourself start to deal with and heal your own trauma, right? This is important work. That's why I say this work that I do, and this isn't a plug. I'm just being dead honest. This work that I do in helping people, right? To notice their patterns, to notice their habits, to notice the stories they tell, to notice the way that they think about themselves and their own identity, to be able to take tools to learn how to navigate this whole fucking human experience from a place of love instead of fear, to be able to take tools to help heal and soothe and calm our nervous system so we can move out of fight and flight, so we can make better decisions, so we can turn off the sympathetic nervous system, turn on the parasympathetic nervous response of rest, relaxation, right? Because when we're being hijacked in our brain by our fear, we are not making good decisions. We are not actually helpful at that point. So going in, doing the work first here with yourself is what's then going to allow us to go out, to become, instead of just looking for the help, is you actually become one of the helpers. But we can't help anybody if we're doing a fucking spiral, if we're overwhelmed, right? If you've got nothing to give, if you have no resources because you are tapped out, because you aren't taking care of your own well-being, your own mental health, your own physical health, then you're not going to have anything to give, or you're going to be giving from a tapped out place, and it's not going to be your best work. You know what I mean? Because you'll be scraping the bottom of the barrel. So this work that I do, it's not just about working on yourself. It's about, getting ourselves right, getting ourselves congruent, getting ourselves in alignment with the values that matter to us and who we really are, returning to love, so that then we can go out into the world and extend that love. To be the helpers, to be helpful, to go out. So here's the thing. In times when we feel like things are so far away, like things are happening in other countries and it's so far away, and people are always like, what can I do to help? I don't know what to do. When I feel anxious or overwhelmed or like one of the best ways that I start to feel better, after, of course, I have 1,000 tools in my toolbox, so I use the ones that I know help me, but also sometimes taking action, doing something for others, being in service to others. Now, I'm not talking about martyrdom where you're just like always giving, always giving, always giving, always giving, and then you have nothing left, and then you just start to feel worn down, run down, and resentful. I'm not talking about that. But once you get yourself right, first you go in, you do your own work, you take a look around, you notice the places where you're violent, you notice the place where you're numbing or whatever, you notice the place where your trauma and triggers are happening, right? Do your work. And then again, take a look around. And instead of looking for the other helpers, because here's the deal, guys, we're the adults now. We're not the little kids anymore. I mean, we feel that way. We all have our inner child and our little kids inside of us. But the way that we soothe and help them too is by becoming the adults that we needed. So now we're the adults. Like I turned 55 the other day, and it's still like, I just think like, oh my God, I'm a full-blown adult over here, right? So it's like, okay, now we're the ones. So it's like, what can I do? Well, if you have a computer or a phone or access to the library where you can look things up, we have books, we have the internet, we have YouTube, we have podcasts, right? It's like we have these ways to, first of all, educate ourselves, to find out, to do some research maybe some organizations or some charities or people who are on the ground and can actually see what's happening in these places. Do a little research. Instead of just sitting around clucking your teeth, sucking your teeth, oh, it's so awful. Oh, it's so awful. Put your money where your mouth is. Is it so awful that you're going to be inspired to actually do something? Because we can all sit around like wringing our hands. And look, I'm not saying everybody at every point in time is going to have the resources, right? You might be, receiving chemo. Your house might have just burned down. You might have a sick kid. You might have just lost your job or lost your home, or I'm not saying every person all the time is going to have the resources, but those of us who are able to respond, I think it's imperative that we do. So whether that's donating some money, right? You find an organization for something that aligns with your values, or something that you feel good giving money to, and you feel like, okay, I've done something. Because that can feel very empowering. I'm doing something. I'm writing my congressman. I'm making a phone call. I'm, moving on to the next thing. I'm volunteering. Because if you can't always give your give your money, maybe you can give your time. Maybe you can give your skill set. Maybe you can give your talent. Maybe you can give your energy. So maybe you can volunteer somewhere. And that's the thing. When things feel so far away, what I often tell people is start close to home. So maybe I can't do anything physically, of course, about little children who are being killed in other countries. But I can take a look around in my own neighborhood. I can take a look around in my own close, like, I always think of that spiral. You start in the center with yourself, and as it spirals out and it gets bigger, it's like, okay, does my neighbor need anything? Does my sweetie need anything? Does a family member need anything? Does one of my friends need anything? And I don't have human kids, but I'm saying, like, does my school need somebody to volunteer? Can I maybe give somebody a ride to go vote? Like, whatever it is. Can I make my sick, cousin some soup and bring it to them? How can I be helpful? Because we're going to hear all of these awful stories. And we might not always, again, have financial means to help. We might not, some people who have, like, let's call them big platforms on social media, right? They might feel compelled to have a guest on to spread the word about this. We all have our own ways where we get to help. Nobody gets to tell us how we should help and what should matter to us and what we should be doing. But you get to be accountable to yourself and your own heart and your own conscience. And so you say, what can I do? And if we can't always help people who feel geographically so far away, again, this is why there's charities. This is why there's, those kinds of things. Get the word out, spread the word sometimes, right? That can be a really helpful thing. But we can also start by looking close to home, or looking at neighborhoods, or looking at people that are around you, certain populations maybe that need support, that haven't been getting support. It gives us a sense of agency. It gives you a sense of to be of use. To be useful is a very powerful thing. To feel like you're contributing, that you're being of service, that you're doing something. It is part of our well-being, I think, as humans. To know that you're not just taking, or you're not just sitting around lamenting. And again, like I said, there'll be, seasons and reasons why maybe you can't at a particular time. Not here to judge anybody. But when we do something, when we take action, love to me is like action of the heart. It's when we move from just thinking about something and talking about something to kind of getting our hands involved. So it moves from this idea, oh, isn't this awful, right? And then you feel it in your heart. So I would say head, heart, hands. It starts in our head. We get moved by our heart, and then we do something with our hands. So we become the helpers. So now when something awful happens, right, you might be the people that the other people are looking to. And when Mr. Rogers' mom says, like, look for the helpers, you might be one of those people. Because there are always the people who stand up and step in, who speak up and show up. And so it just felt important. And I don't even know when this episode is coming out. So it might even be, maybe I'll see if I can get it in the rotation sooner. But I just know a lot of people are feeling really helpless and hopeless and just wicked sad and torn apart by everything that's happening. So before we go out, first we go in. Again, there's all these like spiritual platitudes, right? Like Gandhi saying, I think Gandhi meant it, but Gandhi lived it. He could say it because Gandhi lived it, right? Be the change you want to see in the world. Become it. Be it. And that's that first step of going in. Because again, we can't make good decisions. We can't be good helpers if our own house is on fire. If we're burning to the ground, we're not going to have anything. So when we're ready, right, we get ourselves right to the best of our ability. It doesn't mean we wait till we're perfect, because hello, that's never going to happen. Never, ever, ever, ever. Right? We do the best with what we got. Right? So we go in, we look at our own selves. whatever the cause is or whatever. Oh, you want less violence? Where are you being violent in your life? Pay attention to that. How can we change that? Right? You want less racism? Deal with your own racism. Deal with your own bias. Deal with your own bullshit. Right? Work on that stuff. Start to get yourself right. And then we can go out. Because when we feel completely depleted of resources, we're not going to be resourceful. We're not going to have resources to give or to share. Now, it doesn't mean, because I've seen people who have had, throughout my lifetime, I have seen people who have had almost nothing be some of the most generous people I have ever met. So let's not let's not hypnotize ourselves into thinking like, oh, KK said, I need to go to therapy first before I can be helpful. That is not what I'm saying. I am saying, do your work. Do your work, feel your feelings, get some help, use your tools, right? Do your stuff, be responsible for your own well-being, your 4 levels of healing, emotional, physical, mental, spiritual, so that then you can be a resource and share your resources and be resourceful and help other people. And sometimes it might be that you'll have the opportunity to travel to faraway places and to literally be boots on the ground there, hands on the ground there, love on the ground there. But sometimes we start closer to home. So we want to get the message in before we get the message out. We want to first go in before we go out, because we don't want to be showing up with all of our trauma and drama and stress and anxiety and shit, like trying to right? And there's a ton of tools out there. There's a ton of tools out there for nervous system regulation, everything from breath work to somatic work to yoga, tapping, bilateral stimulation, EMDR, if you see a therapist, right? Havening techniques, I mean, there's so much available for us to learn how to hypnosis audios, meditation, prayer, journaling, writing, self-expression. I mean, there's a 1,000 ways. Just as I always say, there's 1,001 ways to suffer. There are 1,001 ways to help, and to help yourself so that you can be a better helper. So I hope we can just kind of, I mean, I don't want to go off on some tangent about all the madness in the world. The madness drives me mad. The level of separation that we are all experiencing, where we can just look at other human beings as something other than human. Where, how can you, I don't know how we do this to each other. It infuriates me at times. So, but my job, I always say, is I feel my feelings. I do my best to process things. I do myself best to be with things. And then I get back to the business of love, because that's my work. My work isn't sitting on the sidelines, like lamenting, right? My work is, and it's not spiritually bypassing. It's not toxic positive. It's none of that. It's about, this shit is really happening. Right? This is fucking awful. This is devastating. This is not right, etc., etc., etc. And then I always ask, how can I help? What can I do about it? What resources do I have? What can I contribute? How can I serve? And I try to do that through my work. I try to do it through my coaching programs and my podcasts and, the free resources, podcasts, like retreats, things that I do. I mean, yes, it's how I make my living, but it's in the service to trying to, to help others, and to help the parents who have little kids, and to help, to help the humans, the adults who have little kids inside of them that still need help, so that they can become. I always say, if your self-help stops at yourself, then it is incomplete. It's not self-help and healing so that we can sit in our little bubbles and pretend like the world isn't on fire. Okay. So hopefully this was helpful somehow. But I want to encourage you to just not sit, as I always say, don't sit in the shitty diaper. Don't sit in your despair for so long that you become paralyzed, right? You know how the Tin Man, like in Wizard of Oz, like he needed somebody to come along to help him oil his joints, right? We gotta keep our joints movable. And yeah, sometimes we might have to sit down in a field and take a rest. So first we go in, and then we go out, and always with love, to the best of our ability, with love. So it is. Amen. So you guys, wherever you go, may you leave the people you come across. All the people, the ones who look like you, the ones who don't look like you, the ones who maybe have relationships like yours or don't have relationships like yours, right? This isn't about just loving the people who are just like you and think like you and agree with you and pray like you and whatever. Wherever you go, may you leave the people you encounter. May you leave the pets, the animals, the creatures. May you leave the places, the environments. May you leave yourself better than how you first found them. Wherever you go, may you, having been there, may it be a blessing. May you bring more light. May you bring more ease. May you bring more calm. May you bring more compassion. May you bring more empathy. May you bring more presence. May you bring more witnessing. May you bring more love. Wherever you go, may you be the blessing. Thanks for tuning in.
Hey, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of The Karen Kenney Show. I super duper appreciate your time, friendship, and support. And look, if something that I shared from my heart today somehow landed in yours, I'd love to hear about it. So please tag me on Facebook or Instagram or IG stories or wherever the cool kids are hanging out these days, and let me know what your favorite part was or what you found most helpful. You can find me over at Karen Kenney Live. That's Karen, KenneYlive. And if you're digging what I'm saying and you want to hear more, I'd be wicked grateful if you could go to iTunes and subscribe and leave a review, because you guys, that's how you'll help me to keep spreading the love. And if you can think of someone that could benefit from hearing this episode, please share it with them. I'd also love to stay connected with you. So if the feeling is mutual, please go to KarenKenney.com/freebie and download my free guide to building your spiritual team. Until next time, my brothers and sisters, keep living in the fearless flow. Know that I see you, I appreciate you, and I love you. And wherever you go, may you be a blessing.